Hello, everyone. I've been trying to come up with an idea for another video for a while now, other than the ordinary stuff. And I haven't been able to think of anything, but then something fell right into my lap this morning. A controversial, I'm sure, topic that really got me a little incensed and really made me want to make a video immediately about it. Now, this has to do with apparently an interview with Paul that's coming up later in a couple of weeks this month for The Guardian. And this is an article written by Vanessa Thorpe. And the heading is, quote, "It was John who wanted a divorce. McCartney sets the record straight on the Beatles split." Now, let me say something right from the beginning. It's true. John Lennon was the one who went in and got all excited, and I got an adrenaline rush when he said, "I want a divorce," kind of thing, or "I'm leaving the group," so to speak. And everybody went white and everybody was a little shocked. And everybody asked John to please keep hush. Don't announce your decision to leave the Beatles just yet. We have business. Alan Klein wanted everything to kind of be business as usual, not really divulge the news. And John had to keep his mouth shut, and he did. Okay, and we all knew that all of the Beatles at the time, regardless of what this upcoming Peter Jackson documentary reveals, we all know that the Beatles were kind of at odds with each other. Business problems. After Brian Epstein died, they were going on a downhill decline. They had grown up, they had families. John was more involved with wanting to do things with Yoko, and George didn't have as much time on the albums and wasn't given as much attention. The whole shebang, so to speak. It's a whole bunch of stuff. But McCartney at the time, I'm sure, was the one who really wanted the Beatles to stay together the most. But let's not pretend all of a sudden that George and Ringo all of a sudden wanted to stay in the Beatles. They were all kind of like ready to go, more or less, except for Paul. And I always had a problem with the fact that Paul was the one who ultimately dropped the bomb and said, "I'm quitting the Beatles." Paul, in April of 1970, had that article where I think it was April 10th of 70. Paul is quitting the Beatles. I'm leaving, as if like I'm the guy that's had enough of this. I want out of this because Paul didn't like all the nonsense going on. Now I'm sorry if I am definitely, like I said, incensed by this, and I'll go on in detail of what I'm experiencing and why this really annoys me. It has to do with Paul McCartney again, who I like. I love Paul. I have all his stuff. There's his McCartney 3, red dye edition. I have posters all over here. I love Paul McCartney. I love his music. I respect a lot of things about Paul. But in recent times, I'm so sick and tired of Paul trying to be like, "I'm the guy. I was the guy. I'm the guy that wrote all the songs. I'm the guy who had a hand in everything. Even if in my life, Strawberry Fields, even if those songs are John songs, I was there. I wrote the introduction. I did this instrument. I did." He wants to make sure in his legacy, in his old age, that everybody knows I'm the guy. And that's how I feel about it. And it's a shame, really. It's a shame he's got to feel so petty about things. Because now we have the Let It Be Deluxe Edition coming out at the end of this week. And we soon, next month, are going to have the Peter Jackson Get Back, a 6-part documentary on Disney Plus. It's a wonderful time. It's an exciting time. Everybody's excited. And now, all of a sudden, we're going to make sure that Paul should say Paul's going to make sure that Paul is going to go around and he's going to tell everybody, "Hey, I wanted to stay in the Beatles. I really love the Beatles. I wanted to stay. I didn't want to leave. It was John. John was the guy. Then why didn't you say that in 1970? That's the problem I have with Paul McCartney. The problem I have in this situation is that when it suits Paul, he always presents it his way to make him look the way he wants it to be for himself. And that's what kind of gets me about this whole thing. In 1970, when everybody was kind of like angry and it was time to go and this and that and move on to solo projects and get out of it, Paul was like, "Hey, look, I'm out of here. I respect what John does. Doesn't give me any pleasure. I'm going to move. I don't see the Beatles ever reforming." Paul was all too glad to look like the guy in April 1970 that's going to pull the rug out from under and is going to pull the plug. Paul was perfectly happy in 1970 when it was going forward to make it look like, I'm the guy that had enough. I'm the one that said, all right, enough of this. I'm out, But now, 2021, now we're doing a whitewash. You want to make it like, hey, the Beatles really loved each other. The Beatles and the Peter Jackson Get Back. We might have had a few squabbles here and there, but we still were ready to do more albums. We still could have gone on a few years and years after. And you know what? All of a sudden, Paul's like, I'm not the guy. Hey, I wanted to stay. It was Johnny. Johnny was the one that wanted out because that's the narrative now in 2021, unlike the narrative in 1970. So here's some stuff I'm going to read. Hopefully this won't run too long, but here's some stuff I'm going to read in this article. It says, rock history has painted Paul McCartney as the man who broke up the band. And that's the way he wanted it, by the way, in 1970. Now he reveals that it was Lennon who was first to look for a way out. That's true. Nothing here is untrue. John Lennon was the first one to look for a way out. John Lennon really was the one who broke up the Beatles, and they should have allowed him to announce it in 1969, late 69. John should have been the one to say, I'm leaving the group, I'm breaking it up. But he respectfully followed the letter and said, okay, we're going to keep it hush-hush. I'll do it. I'll keep it hush-hush. And Paul was all too happy to say, I broke him up. Back in 1970. But anyway, let's go back to the article and to 2021. Okay, but now Paul McCartney is setting the record straight for good. Quote, I didn't instigate the split. That was our Johnny. He has insisted in a candid and detailed interview to be broadcast later this month. This is going to come out later this month. And in all fairness, of course, I haven't heard the finished interview, read or heard the finished interview. He might have, you don't know the tone of his voice or how he's saying it. It might be playfully or whatever, but right here, the way it reads in this article is very unsettling. Recalling what he sees as, quote, the most difficult period of my life, which it was. I understand Paul was lost and really didn't want the group to end. McCartney, who celebrates his 80th birthday next summer, reveals he wanted the group to go on, especially as just after 8 years together, they were still creating pretty good stuff, quote. Abbey Road, Let It Be, not bad, quote, He will argue in an upcoming episode, it's an episode of a Radio 4 interview series. Okay, sorry. He will argue in an upcoming episode of the new BBC radio interview series, This Cultural Life, quote, this was my band, this was my job, this was my life, so I wanted it to continue. Let me pause here to say I stand corrected. This is a BBC radio interview, not a Guardian thing. The article that I'm quoting here is from the Guardian, I guess. The actual interview is a BBC Radio 4 interview called This Cultural Life that'll come. But anyway, I agree and I understand, I believe Paul and everything he says. He didn't want the Beatles to end. I'm saying in 1970, he took the tough road and made it look like he wanted out. I'm not going to let anybody else announce it. I'm the one that's going to get out of here. But now you don't want to look like the beggar. You didn't mind in 1970 looking like the instigator, the tougher guy, I guess. Now, in 2021, you want it to be known to the world, now that we're trying to patch the Beatles up and make it look like everybody was all lovey-dovey in the Get Back documentary. Now, all of a sudden, it's a matter of like, well, look, I didn't want these guys. I didn't want the Beatles to end. No, I didn't. If Lennon had not quit, the band's musical journey might have been much longer, McCartney agrees. Quote, it could have been. The point of it really was that John was making a new life with Yoko. Of course, John had always wanted to sort of break loose from society because, he was brought up by his Aunt Mimi, who was quite repressive. So he was always looking to break loose. Yeah, okay, he was. So why didn't you let him break loose? Back in 69 or 70, why didn't you let him break loose? Why didn't you let him announce that he was the one that was going to break loose? No, you don't want that to happen. Then Paul McCartney was the one in 1970 that was going to be the guy, right? But now you want to be the guy that was trying to save the Beatles in 2021. So anyway, That's about it. Some more quote. Legend has it that McCartney unilaterally broke up the band in 1970 when he answered a journalist's question with the claim that the Beatles no longer existed. He was also accused of spoiling the group dynamic by asking in lawyers to settle their disputes. It is a burden he has struggled with ever since. Quote, I had to live with that because that was what people saw. All I could do is say no, he admits, speaking out in advance of the publication of the book of lyrics. Get that, you know, interesting how his book of lyrics is coming out, and this is like, going to support that. It's also interesting how this whole thing comes out just in time for Let It Be, just in time for the Peter Jackson Get Back. Interesting. Okay, on and on and on. I could go, but that's the gist of it here, folks. And here's the part that gets me. Asked about his decision to go solo, McCartney says, quote, stop right there. I am not the person who instigated the split. Oh, no, no, no. John walked into the room one day and said, I am leaving the Beatles. Is that instigating the split or not? Yes, it is. John instigated the split. Let the man split up in 69, 70. Let him do it. No, you wanted the credit. You wanted to do it in 70. Now you don't want to. Now you're backpedaling. I didn't want to do it. Johnny did it. And then McCartney tells the interviewer John Wilson that Lennon described his decision to leave as, quote, quite thrilling and, quote, rather like a divorce. Yeah. The other members, he adds, quote, were left to pick up the pieces. That's what I mean. Don't bring George and Ringo in. The other members were left to pick up the pieces. George was all too happy to get the heck out of there by that time, too, okay? And Ringo, too, would go either way. I don't think he was too enamored with the Beatles, really, at the time. Even though now the rose-colored glasses are coming on, and oh, what a great time it was at the end. Look, this could go on and on. I could read a lot of stuff. And this one more quote. McCartney says, around about that time, we were having little meetings, and it was horrible. It was the opposite of what we were. We were musicians, not meeting people. Agreed. And then he said, the split became inevitable, Paul believes, because John, quote, wanted to go in a bag and lie in bed for a week in Amsterdam for peace. And you couldn't argue with that. Yet he does not hold Yoko responsible. He adds, they were a great couple. There was huge strength there. Look, that's the bottom line as I close my laptop lid. Look, I could go on forever. Yeah, I'm kind of I've told you I was uptight about this, incensed about this. Is it going to bring discussion? Let it bring discussion. I've been looking for a topic for a future edition of my Fab Gab Beatles show. Maybe this is one potential topic. I have just had it, folks. I love Paul McCartney. I think he's the greatest songwriter who ever lived. There are a lot of things I respect about Paul McCartney, and one day I have a video in mind. I'm going to list like the top 10 things I love about and respect about Paul. Please understand that. And I hate this whole thing about John Lennon versus Paul McCartney. John versus Paul. Who are you, a John guy or a Paul guy? I hate it. But this just got me in a dither, okay? Because Paul, I'm quiet about this most of the time. He steps out and talks about the song being for the benefit of Mr. Kite a decade or so ago, and decides that after like 45 or 50 years, now suddenly he wants to claim it as partially his because he wrote some of it. He wrote some of Help, he wrote some of In My Life, he wrote some. Hey, look, if it's true, it's true. I'm not saying it's not true. I believe it is true, but it's not a matter of him making things up. What I just understand is why he's content to be silent for many years and allow. What's so bad about allowing John to have In My Life, allowing John to have Mr. Kite, allowing John to have Help? What Strawberry Fields? Why so petty as you get closer to the end? Why so particular about it? Because you want everybody to know it's all about you. And that kind of bugs me, folks. And I know a lot of people are not going to like this video. As I say, Paul's been doing this for a while, releasing his album, Paul McCartney 3 Imagined. I didn't say anything. Why do you got to cop the title Imagined in there, Imagined and stuff? And certain releases, he likes to release things. I don't remember which ones exactly, but I remember specifically when John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band deluxe set was coming out. I remember Paul had something else like right around that time to kind of jump in. I mean, look, come on. I love all the Beatles, but there are moments like this that I just really can't stand. Later.